What's up, guys? Today I am out east, way out in East London, a place called Tobacco Dock near Wapping, to do a talk for Barclays, obviously big UK bank, all based around Formula 1. But whilst I'm here, as it's Wednesday, and it is the Wednesday before the Brazilian Grand Prix this weekend, I thought we should talk about that. So, what makes the Brazilian Grand Prix special? Well, loads of things. The passion for the local people is probably the biggest thing that stands out for me. Just amazing support over the years of some of their Brazilian drivers. I mean, fans that will get up early and be queuing outside the circuit gates. I mean, really, really early in the morning for a long way out the circuit and down the road and around the corner. Incredible dedication to their sport. And this is a country, and certainly an area of the country, places of it that definitely don't have a huge amount of money there, and some of these people spend what amounts to months worth of wages to get themselves a ticket just to see a glimpse of some of their favourite drivers and their favourite cars. So a real amazing sign of passion, and that really shows through. The atmosphere within the place is just incredible. The noise, I mean, moments that stand out for me, particularly when, I remember, of course, when, 2008, obviously, I'll talk about that in a moment, but that moment when Felipe Massa retired for the first time, the kind of passion that was shown for him by the Brazilian fans was just, I mean, couldn't help but bring a tear to your eye. And everybody in the pit lane, of course, came out, gave him a standing ovation as he walked his way down the pit lane towards his wife and children. Amazing moments, and the crowd, I mean, stayed late into the night to catch a glimpse of him, and he duly went out and kind of gave them a big wave and beat his chest just like he did in 2008, returning that passion back to them, I guess. 2008, I mean, you can't talk about the Brazilian Grand Prix. Oh, hello, little guy. Can't talk about the Brazilian Grand Prix without mentioning 2008. From a personal perspective, of course, it was amazing. It was probably the highlight of my career, the most amazing moment of my career. It's just not something that you can write. It's one of the most incredible sporting events. I mean, I think even outside of Formula 1, that's one of those occasions that you will not see repeated. To have a championship go down to the wire, and I mean the wire, the kind of last corner of the last lap of the last race of the season, in those incredibly changing conditions, this young kid taking on the home hero who had done everything he needed to do. Felipe Massa won the Grand Prix in absolute style, dominated that weekend. He couldn't do any more than that on that particular day, and then it was down to us, and it was down to Lewis achieving that fifth place. And you all know the story, but the emotions in our garage that weekend were, I mean, unbelievable. You can read about it, of course, in my book. There's another plug, so go and get that, because it talks through the whole day, and it talks through the emotional roller coaster that it was. But amazing place, amazing scenes, amazing atmosphere, amazing fans, and a great way to kind of start to round off the season. What kind of challenges does it pose for the teams? Well, this is another circuit that's at pretty high altitudes, about 800 metres above sea level. Nothing like, of course, Mexico City at the last round, but the effects of Mexico City are still there, even though they're at a reduced level, of course. That means aero levels have to be at a little bit greater level than they otherwise would be. Cooling levels to the same effect. All at a reduced rate, as I say, to Mexico, but still something to be considered by the engineers. It's an incredibly old school track, which means that it's bumpy. It's got loads of lumps and bumps. It's got elevation. There are loads of corners where you go into them kind of blind. You go up to the crest of a bump, and the apex is at the crest, so you're turning in blind almost. If you've ever played it on a kind of PlayStation or a games console, you'll know what I'm talking about. You have to trust your kind of braking marker points and your turn-in marker points. You have to have absolute confidence in the car. And braking's one of those things that, because it's so bumpy, you may have noticed this in your road car sometimes. If you're ever pushing your road car to the limit and you're on bumps, it's very easy to lift the wheel off the ground and lock the brakes and skid, particularly on the inside wheel and some of those corners. So that's something that teams have to be very mindful of. And part of the track walk around this particular track will be to walk around on the Thursday afternoon and just understand where the worst of those bumps are, which curbs you can use, which ones you definitely can't, and if there are slightly different lines that you may be able to take that might help that situation for you. Right, talk went well, overran slightly. The whole schedule was running a bit late, so I'm now a bit pressed for time to get home to pick the kids up from school. But it went well, great venue, great crowd, really enjoyed it. Now, where were we? The Brazilian Grand Prix. Downforce levels, because of the high altitude, downforce levels are a bit higher than normal, perhaps, I guess, medium to high downforce, you would say. The braking is pretty low, there's not too many aggressive braking events there. It's actually pretty easy on the brakes, but what you do have to have is this oh, I've got lost, I've gone the wrong way. Wrong way. What you do have to have is this real confidence as a driver on the brakes. You've got to have a real balance, a real stable, particularly between the front brakes, because of those bumps and lumps on the circuit and easily locking front brakes. So really got to have confidence as a driver in that. I don't know how I'm supposed to get out of here. I've got lost. Oh no, here's some steps. Oh no, that's going onto a boat. How the hell do I get out of it? Hold on, I'm going to ask somebody. Excuse me, how do I get back out onto the main road? Because I can't get out that way, can you?
Yeah, you see the door shutting now. You see where the guy is standing with the
Yeah. Oh, is that a door?
There's a button.
Oh, okay. Alright, thanks mate. Right, okay, so it's just me being an idiot. There is a door down here to get out. So, what else can we say about the Brazilian Grand Prix? The weather. The weather almost always plays some kind of part. It's nestled amongst the hills, nestled in an amazing situation, by the way, with the favelas, sprawling favelas all around it. It's a very poor part of town with this huge racetrack, or in fact it's quite a compact racetrack in the middle of it. It creates this almost amphitheatre-like situation. But because of all of that, the rain or the weather can change pretty quickly. I mean, I've been there before when it's been pretty decent sunshine, and then 5 minutes later the rain is coming into the back of the garage almost horizontally, hitting the kind of rear wing of the car, and that can change very, very quickly. So here we go. Oh, is it? Honestly, I'm not having a good day today. Thanks. Not really that complicated, is it? It's a door, just pull it to open, Elvis. It was all going so well, but after massive train delays, I've now made it back as far as Woking. Alright, a familiar place to me, with McLaren based here. But they've now cancelled my train, and I'm now waiting for a taxi to get the final part of my journey done. Nightmare. Right, so made it into a taxi, on the way home now. The kids are in after school club, so they're all sorted, so we're all good again. So let's wrap up this video. Other unique things about, or not unique, but unusual things about the Interlagos track. One of them is the fact that it's anti-clockwise. And there are not that many of those, 5 I think in the entire calendar of 21 races. That has a number of effects, and one of those is on the driver itself, because normally when you're going around a racetrack, most of which are clockwise, you're normally turning right most of the time, and that means that the stresses and strains on the driver's neck are much more substantial going around a right-hand corner than it would be going around the left hand, and much more frequent. So the driver's neck muscles on that particular side get built up. When you come to do an anti-clockwise circuit, because they are much less frequent, it does take its toll on the driver. No matter how much you work out in the gym, it's very difficult to replicate the exact sensations that you get around an anti-clockwise track. So you do find that some drivers suffer in these situations, particularly on the Friday when there's lots of laps to be done over the course of the whole day. I've known drivers in the past who rest a kind of pad on the side of the head restraint almost to lean against through some of the prolonged corners, just to protect those neck muscles. So that's something that the drivers have to contend with. As for the cars, it does have an effect on tyres, of course. This particular track, the right rear tyre is going to be the one that perhaps suffers most, the one that's under the most stress. And it's not a particularly tough track on tyres, but as you come through some of those corners, between corner apex, mid corner and the exit, as you've gone through the corner, leaning on that right rear tyre all the way around, then you're asking an awful lot of it as you get into the traction phase, trying to get the power down. It's the right rear that will suffer before any of the others. So but definitely keep an eye on that during the Grand Prix. But as I say, not the toughest circuit on tyres, and I would fully expect most teams here to be looking at a one-stop race, something we've become quite accustomed to, isn't it, recently? It's a very short lap, and that means that if you do make extra pit stops, the chances are you're going to feed back out into traffic because it's all condensed. The fact that it's a short lap also means that qualifying is often very, very close. So we can get mixed up grids, but as we've seen over some of the recent races, mixed up grids in the modern era of Formula One don't necessarily mean mixed up races, because the top 6 cars very quickly will find their way back to the front. It's in terms of setup, because it's a very bumpy old school track, the curbs can be quite aggressive at certain parts of this lap. You do need a softer setup on the suspension, so springs will be a little bit softer than normal. Bump settings on the dampers equally. Anti-roll bars, because of the many quick changes of direction, quite often, and also because they're often quite on the brows of hills, there's a slightly unique anti-roll bar set up for this track as well. So lots of things for the drivers and engineers to contend with, but it's a great place, it's a great atmosphere, it's delivered some spectacular races over the years. So let's hope we get another one of those this weekend. Even though the championship may be sewn up, there is still plenty to play for. So I hope it's a good one, enjoy it, and I will hopefully speak to you tomorrow.